El Salvador versus Honduras 1969. In June 1969, El Salvador and Honduras played 3 football matches to qualify for the 1970 World Cup in Mexico. The two countries were already on the edge. Land disputes, mass deportations of Salvadoran migrants from Honduras, and decades of economic tension had been building for years. The football matches didn't cause the war, but they were the last thing that happened before it started. The first match was played in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, on June 8th. Honduras won 1-0, and El Salvadoran teenager named Emilia Bolaños watched the final whistle on television and shot herself in the heart. Her funeral was broadcast on Salvadoran national television. The president and his cabinet walked behind her coffin. The second match was played in San Salvador 6 days later. El Salvador won 3-0. Honduran fans who had traveled to the match were attacked. Their cars were burned. The Honduran flag was set alight and replaced with a dirty rag. Honduras severed diplomatic relations with El Salvador the next day. The deciding third match was played on neutral ground in Mexico City on June 27th. El Salvador won 3-2 after extra time and qualified for the World Cup. 13 days later, on July 14th, the El Salvadoran Air Force bombed Honduran military bases and the El Salvadoran army crossed the border. The war lasted 100 hours. It is called the Football War, La Guerra del Fútbol, in most historical accounts, though this name has always bothered historians because it implies football caused it. Football didn't cause it. Football was the final pressure on a situation that had been building for decades, but the timing is what it is. 3 football matches, 13 days, a war. Approximately 3,000 people died. Around 300,000 Salvadoran migrants were displaced from Honduras. The border between the two countries wasn't formally demarcated until 1992.
The Barbarian Invasions, Rome and the Goths, 376 AD. This one requires going back considerably further than 1969. In 376 AD, the Roman Empire allowed a large group of Visigoths, roughly 200,000 people fleeing the advancing Huns, to cross the Danube River and settle within Roman territory. The Romans saw an opportunity, a large population that could be taxed, conscripted, and used as a buffer against further incursions from the east. What this has to do with football requires a short explanation. The Romans had a game called harpastum, a small ball sport involving carrying and passing a ball across a field. It was fast, physical, and widely played by soldiers. When the Visigoths were settled inside Roman borders, Roman soldiers and Visigoth warriors played harpastum together in the camps along the Danube. The Roman administrators responsible for the Visigoths were corrupt. They were charging for food that was supposed to be provided, and when the Visigoths couldn't pay, they were allegedly being offered their own children as slaves in exchange. Tensions in the camps were extreme. According to some historical accounts, and this is where the sources become disputed, a harpastum match between Roman soldiers and Visigoths in one of the frontier camps turned violent. A fight broke out during or after the game. Roman soldiers were killed. The incident escalated into a general uprising. Whether a ball game was actually the direct trigger is debated. What is not debated is that the Visigoths revolted in 377 AD, that the situation in the camps was the immediate cause, and that the revolt culminated in the Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD, one of the most decisive Roman military defeats in history. The Emperor Valens was killed. 2/3 of the Eastern Roman army was destroyed. Historians mark Adrianople as one of the events that began to unravel the Western Roman Empire. A ball game may or may not have started it. The conditions that made it possible had been building for years. Sound familiar?
Nigeria versus Angola, 2010 Africa Cup of Nations qualifying. In January 2010, the Togo national football team was traveling by bus through the Cabinda enclave, a small strip of Angolan territory separated from the main body of Angola by the Democratic Republic of Congo, on their way to compete in the Africa Cup of Nations. The bus was ambushed by gunmen from FLEC, the Front for the Liberation of the Enclave of Cabinda, a separatist group that had been fighting for Cabinda's independence from Angola for decades. The driver and the assistant coach were killed. The goalkeeper was shot. 8 other team members were wounded. Togo withdrew from the tournament. The Togolese government initially called it an act of war. The Cabindan separatists stated explicitly that the attack was intended to disrupt the tournament and draw international attention to their cause, which it did, though not in the way they had hoped. This wasn't a war started by a football match. It was a war, a decades-long separatist conflict that reached into a football tournament and used it as a stage. The distinction matters, but the outcome for the people on that bus was the same regardless of the political framing. Greece versus Turkey, the ongoing subtext. Greece and Turkey have one of the most politically charged football rivalries in the world. The two countries have been to the brink of armed conflict multiple times in the modern era over Cyprus, over Aegean airspace, over islands whose sovereignty has been disputed for decades. When Greece and Turkey play football, it is never just football. In 2000, the two national teams were drawn into a European Championship qualifying group. Greece and Turkey had recently experienced a rapprochement, a genuine warming of relations, following major earthquakes in both countries in 1999, where each nation had sent aid to the other. The football matches that year were framed, unusually, as an extension of that goodwill. It didn't stay that way. Crowd incidents, political statements made through supporter behavior, and the weight of historical grievance that both sets of fans carry into every encounter have meant that Greece-Turkey matches consistently require significant security operations and generate diplomatic incidents. No Greece-Turkey football match has started a war, but the matches exist within a context where war has been a real and recent possibility, and where the football pitch is understood by both governments as a space where that tension either gets managed or doesn't. In 1996, Greece and Turkey came close to armed conflict over an uninhabited rocky outcrop in the Aegean called Imia. Military vessels from both countries were in the area simultaneously. The crisis was diffused diplomatically. 4 months later, they played a World Cup qualifier. The match ended 0-0. Riot police were deployed inside and outside the stadium. Iraq, 1997 World Cup qualifying. In 1997, Iraq was in the middle of qualifying for the 1998 World Cup in France. Uday Hussein, son of Saddam Hussein and head of the Iraqi Olympic Committee and Iraqi Football Association, had established a specific and well-documented policy for dealing with poor football performance. Players who underperformed, missed penalties, or lost matches were detained, interrogated, and in documented cases, tortured. Former Iraqi players who have spoken publicly after leaving the country describe being beaten on the soles of their feet, a method that doesn't prevent walking but causes severe pain, and imprisoned in conditions designed to be psychologically as well as physically damaging. Iraq qualified for the 1986 World Cup. They were eliminated in the group stage. Players have stated in interviews that they were punished on their return. During the 1997 qualifying campaign, Iraq's matches were not simply sporting events, they were events with genuine personal consequences for every player on the pitch. The pressure applied to the players was not metaphorical. Winning wasn't preferable, winning was necessary in a way that has no equivalent in any other football context. Iraq did not qualify for the 1998 World Cup. What happened to the players afterward has never been fully documented. This isn't a war started by football. It's something arguably more disturbing, a state apparatus of violence attached directly to football results, where the outcome of a match determined what happened to real people in the days that followed. Every example on this list shares the same structure. Football didn't cause the conflict was already there. In land disputes, in colonial legacies, in ethnic tensions, in political grievances that had been accumulating for years or decades or centuries. What football did was provide a moment, a specific, public, emotionally charged moment where the existing tension had somewhere to go. The football war is called the football war because 3 matches happened 13 days before a war, not because football caused a war, because football was there when a war that was already coming finally arrived. That's the thing about football at this level. It doesn't create what's underneath. It just brings it to the surface faster than almost anything else can.